Kingdom Hearts 358 Days Over 2 is a video game, not just a movie. This isn't a hot take, this is just a fact of life. Yet somehow in 2025, I still find people who still thought this was just a cutscene compilation. So one day I decided I'd had enough and got to work on the project you're watching today that goes over everything that was cut from the quote-unquote movie, and also stuff that was changed. Now obviously, as a disclaimer, I won't mention every time they changed like a single word in a line of dialogue unless it completely changes what someone says, or unless the game's version is just a lot better, which you'll come to find out is often the case. Don't worry, the movie still has its qualities, and I'll mention them as they come up, but yeah. Just to prepare you, the game is the definitive experience, and I hope that by watching this, you'll come to see that. So without further ado, this is everything missing or cut from the Kingdom Hearts 358 Days Over 2 collection of remastered cutscenes that some call a movie. From the start, the scene of Roxas rolling out of bed having discovered he has gained awareness and coming to the gray area, the lounge for the organization, was completely removed. Here you can talk to several of the organization members for the very first time, including Xigbar, Larxene, and Saïx, who we'll touch base with every time we want to go on a mission. I can't believe the movie also somehow cut out the very first Axel-Roxas interaction. He gives Roxas a proper good morning and then offers to walk with him to the Round Room, the organization's staff meeting place with the stupid high chairs. Axel also acts a little hesitant at first before being asked to train and look out for Roxas, asking Saïx if he's the kid's babysitter now, which is funny because he sort of does become one for both him and Xion as the game progresses. Today's lounge occupants are Zexion, Axel, and Xion. Xion doesn't say anything though, and Zexion and Axel don't really offer anything interesting worth noting, and Saïx is almost always here, without fail. Whenever you visit a new world for the first time in this game, you get a mini tour followed by the name of the world. Always thought it was a nice touch. When you arrive in Twilight Town for your very first mission with Axel, you get a very on-the-spot, off-the-dome kind of tutorial, and it's obvious he's not very good at this teacher thing. You know, you gotta appreciate just how sassy Axel really is in the game, because I feel like they kind of toned it down in the movie. Like, just listen to this guy. That's all I have to do? I know, don't hurt yourself. I mean, hello, look at it. Big menacing X? I'll take the beaten path. Thanks. Roxas, there's this thing about chests. They have stuff in them. RTC, also known as Return to Castle, is never really used as an acronym in the movie. Not even in, like, the text box version. Like, it's gone. It's absent. It seems Roxas is kind of catching on to Axel's sass here. Before they RTC, Axel reminds Roxas of their usual spot on top of the clock tower before we cut to them eating ice cream. To show us that they've done this before, Roxas just doesn't remember because of his zombie mode. So Roxas' dialogue is changed slightly for his journal entry here. That was my first day working for the organization. They gave me missions and I carried them out. But if you asked me what my job was, I would have just stared at you. What we got in the movie was more or less an abridged version of this, but it kind of feels lacking in some way.
For the 7 days since my arrival, the name Roxas and the number 13 were all I had. Who the people around me were, what they wanted, or what they were trying to do, I had no idea.
But like I said, if it doesn't change it too drastically, I usually won't mention it, but we're gonna cover the early journal entries at least a little bit. Wake up in the morning to find out that we are teamed up with the fabulous Marluxia for the day. You can talk to Demyx for the first time here, and he asks Roxas if he knows any instruments, which I thought was worth mentioning. I don't know about an instrument, but my boy sure can sing. You can also, of course, talk to Vexen and Marluxia, who both just mutter something about going on the mission, or Roxas wielding the Keyblade, which is along the lines of what most of them say in these first few days. In the movie, we do get a sort of Cliff Notes version of Roxas and Marluxia's conversation, which is something we will see happen a lot over the next couple of days, but I still vastly prefer the real-time interactions between Roxas and the Castle Oblivion crew. Roxas, was it? I never properly introduced myself. I am Marluxia, number 11. Okay, so what do we have to do today? Marluxia asks Roxas to summon the Keyblade, and he seems to admire it before they are attacked by Heartless. From there, he gives us a basic tutorial of the two different Heartless types, Pureblood and Emblem, and reveals the organization's true goal is to complete Kingdom Hearts, the moon, not the game, so they can have hearts of their own, and only Roxas has the power to do this because he's the only one in their ranks who has the ability to wield the Keyblade. Which is an absolute lie, by the way. When the mission is finished, Marluxia remarks to himself the things that could be done with the Keyblade's power, which is a nice prelude to his manipulation of Sora in the events of Chain of Memories. Another change in Roxas' diary monologue. And that was how I found out the organization's goal. So they wanted to collect these things called hearts. I didn't know what a heart was, or how it even mattered, but at least I know what my part was. I'm noticing that they seem to have changed in the movie from past tense to present tense with these. Today is Zexion, who you can talk with in the lobby before leaving, but before that, you can also hear more of Marluxia's babbling on the Keyblade's power and get the silent treatment from Lexaeus. Zexion teaches us about the mission bar and backs up what Marluxia was saying before about the organization's goal. He also teaches us to not be lazy and reminds us that by going the extra mile we can gain more rewards from our missions because the organization likes to reward its hard workers. Roxas, you and I and all the organization's members are what we call nobodies. Well, that's not very nice. Zexion explains to Roxas why he doesn't have a heart and therefore cannot feel anything. Another lie, but I still prefer this over the Cliff Notes. In this case, I think I prefer the movie's rendition of this journal entry.
Nobodies don't exist. We in the organization were born without hearts. So, if we don't have hearts, does that mean we don't exist?
The game version still feels more personal to Roxas, as the diary should, but the voice work of Jesse definitely sells the movie's version a little more for me. Oh yeah, today is Lurksine, and she's not here. But Xigbar is just chilling there so nonchalantly that I can't even be mad. Yes, Roxas, you can use magic. Just equip some panels in the right slots and you can do it. To my what? Get practicing so you can make yourself useful. Why don't you get off the couch and do the same thing, How about that, Xigbar? Interesting. So much to inspect, to dissect. Someone woke up and chose to be creepy today, didn't they? The movie once again decides to give a Cliff Notes version of today's mission in placement of what really happens here. Larksine seemed displeased with him for being a Keyblade wielder. Like, no! She hates his guts for being put on this baby mission, and the entire time you're with her, she's meant to teach you how to use magic, but she mostly just verbally abuses and berates Roxas. And honestly, there's quite a few quotable interactions here that are worth seeing instead of skipping too. This diary entry for the day says more or less the same thing in both versions, just slightly different, so we'll just move along. You're mine today, Roxas. Alright. What do you want? I'm busy. Go hit your head against the glass or something. Well, someone forgot their coffee. It appears my conclusions were once again flawless. Man, why's Larksine gotta be such a witch? A witch all the time. The movie once again boils down exactly what happens during the mission to a single paragraph. I mean, yes, he does tell Roxas about the existence of other worlds, and I guess that could be considered the main takeaway, but the whole point of these missions is to teach Roxas and the player on how to do reconnaissance. These types of missions, no matter how boring or frustrating they might be at times, offer a nice change of pace from the heartless hunting ones. Vexen insulting my poor son over not knowing the exact layout of the bricks or whatever just to stroke his own ego as the organization's certified creepy nerd will never not infuriate me, but if you go the extra mile to observe more spots and get the full mission reward, you actually get a half compliment from him for doing so, which is kind of a reward in its own. This time around, the diary entry is highly superior in the DS game. Later on, I discover the job was more than just a commute between the castle and that town. The walls between worlds are steep, so we create our own ways, the dark corridors, which lead to every place imaginable. This delivery is much more preferable to me than having Roxas end the movie rendition with, "or so they say," like he doesn't go through the corridors every fucking day. He's not that dumb. Come on. Yes, what is it? Don't waste my time with idle chatter. Why is it that even the bookworm gets away with pushing around Roxas? Marluxia and Lexius don't really say anything worthy of note, but since it's missing anyway, here you go. One of the greatest sins of the movie is how we get this frame of Roxas hunched over like he's gonna puke without the context behind it. Something we'll see pretty often in future days. Basically, Lexius teaches Roxas about the limit break, which is a sort of last resort attack to take out enemies whenever you're on your last legs. The movie says that he exhorted him, which I feel in hindsight is a bit of an understatement since he backhands the boy clear across the face to get him down to critical HP. Man, talk about friendly fire. Diary entry for day 13 is more or less the same, just worded slightly differently again, and I gotta say I like the DS version's wording slightly more, but the delivery by Jesse McCartney once again gives it bonus points. This is also the last diary entry you are forced to experience, with the rest being optional things that you can read from the game menu at your leisure. Today, Roxas gets teamed up with Axel again, to which he shows much enthusiasm. Axel tells him that it will be his first real mission today, and informs us that we should upgrade our Keyblade and make sure we're extra prepared, and also that we can go play around in previous days via holo missions, which is how we can go back to get chests that we couldn't access before later down the line when we get more movement options, granting more replayability to the game. Axel repeats himself, Larxene thinks we're hitting on her, Marluxia states the obvious, and Demyx is just being Demyx. When they arrive for their mission together, Axel promptly says that it's officially their second mission together, and Roxas responds semi-awkwardly, probably slightly puzzled over the difference in how he's treated on missions with Axel versus with the rest of the organization, which gives the next cutscene that was included in the movie the context of the "what are friends" conversation from earlier. This scene was, of course, changed in the movie in the same way most stuff was so far. Take away more of the personality and the wit of the interactions for a more simple and straightforward conversation. The truth is, unless you are watching them side by side, you won't notice much of a difference, but if you're like me, you will notice that they completely cut Hayner Pentanolet's lines from this, and the clock tower scene, which, I mean, was probably for budgetary reasons, but they also cut the whole part where Roxas says he's just gonna go back to his room now that their job is done, and Axel instead pushes him to come get ice cream with him again, starting the tradition of always doing it after work because that's what friends do. This scene is incredibly important to Roxas' understanding of what friends are, and helps push the "who else will I have ice cream with" line later on to new heights of depressing. And while they did change up the dialogue a little bit and cut some things, this scene is still mostly the same otherwise, so I'm not too upset by it. Today's the start of the last week with half of the organization before they go to Castle Oblivion, so of course we're going to check out all of their dialogue options. You'll notice that both Larxene on day 15 and Marluxia on day 16 both allude to their plot to overthrow the organization, as we see in Chain of Memories. Both even consider the idea of letting Roxas in on their plans, but for plot reasons, they don't. Zexion compliments our work efforts here on both day 15 and 16. On day 15, Luxord gives us foreshadowing to the eventual day off episode, and on day 16 he gives the first allusion to the organization leaving to Castle Oblivion by crying to himself over the loss of half of the Poker League. So I guess that confirms that the organization has poker nights? And if it's not Luxord, then who do you think wins most of the games? The missions for days 15 through 17 show Roxas taking out Heartless alongside Larxene and Marluxia, and also the Test of Endurance mission the organization set up for him that the movie does allude to with candid shots that look cool, but I'll always say it's more fun to experience them for yourself. Also, this exchange on day 15 where Axel hits Roxas with the "how's work" question felt so relatable and worth mentioning since I get asked this question a lot myself. I think about this conversation so often because I think it just applies perfectly to every 9-to-5 worker that has a friend at work. Skipping ahead a few days, something this game does semi-often, on day 22, around half of the organization has officially left now. Xigbar seems rather pleased. Xaldin reminds Roxas to just stay on task, and Axel is still here to accompany us on our mission. If you were watching the movie, you might assume Axel left with everyone else, but he doesn't actually leave until the day after when getting orders from Syx. The mission itself does have some nice little interactions between the duo, nothing really life-changing, but you can see that Roxas and Axel are much more comfortable working together now, and then meeting up for ice cream afterwards. Their friendship has come a long way over the last 3 weeks, and it shows with how sad Roxas feels when Axel really finally does have to go. The first 2 cutscenes of Day 23 play out pretty much exactly the same in both versions. Demyx gives us a blazing shard he found lying around as he ponders over what Castle Oblivion is like since he's never really been. With Axel gone now, it's our turn to take leadership on a mission as it's our first official outing with Xion. Roxas seems a little hesitant and taken aback that he's suddenly taking a teaching role when he's just barely not a rookie himself. Not only that, but Xion's silence makes everything he says to her feel like he's talking to a wall, much like how it was for Axel when he first stepped into the role for Roxas. Only, Roxas at least said something. After hastily dealing with the poison plant, Roxas tells her to RTC by herself so that he can head up to the clock tower to wait for Axel in hopes that he would show up for the regular rendezvous, but he never does, and Roxas sits alone. Day 24 opens to a group huddle of some of the nobodies who stayed behind being quite thankful for the peace and quiet now that half of the organization is away. In the DS version, they refer to them as bossy coworkers and the Dream Team by Demyx, and in the movie it's loudmouths and bossy coworkers. Luxord makes another game-related pun about the absence of the other members. Oh hey, Xigbar knows how to count. I really love Demyx and Larxine's hatred for one another. He's so glad she's gone, and to have one less person nagging him about being a chill guy who plays guitar. In another riveting adventure with Xion, we must destroy a swarm of deserter Heartless in the Sandlot, but in the remastered cutscene, Roxas seems to be ending the fight in the alley instead. Just thought it was odd. I don't know. The scene where Xion speaks her first words, the name Roxas, plays out mostly the same, but I'm surprised that somehow the following moment where Roxas wonders if his name was the first thing she said was cut from the scene. To start off the day, Roxas greets Xion with a good morning, which she slowly and awkwardly responds to in kind. A cute little interaction that I kind of miss. Xaldin gives us a moonstone to help us work harder, I guess? The scene where Xion reveals her face to Roxas for the first time is beautifully redone in the HD cutscene. The only caveat I have is that instead of wishing Xion good luck back, he just says, yeah, let's go. Unsure if he was just taken aback by her appearance, or if they are just playing up the awkwardness, but it's hardly a noticeable change unless you're looking for it. In the game, Roxas starts the day waking up, stretching, and then immediately hoping that his mission today will be with Xion. I don't know, man. I don't like jumping to shipping conclusions in this series, but that seems like the kind of thing someone with a crush would do. When he enters the gray area, he immediately overhears Xaldin and Demyx talking about something that seems to have gone wrong. Demyx doesn't seem to know the details, though, so Roxas walks over to Xigbar, who explains that at least one person may have been eliminated at Castle Oblivion. The scene then plays out how you've seen in the movie, with Syx coming over to join the conversation. I like the movie's choice of changing the music to fit the tone, and the crestfallen look on Roxas' face as Xigbar and Syx walk away quite a bit. However, it makes no sense to not have the other three in the scene talk, since at least 2 of them have already recorded lines for this movie. Xigbar asks us if we're ready to go since we're teamed up to go to a new world together today, and Xion sounds slightly disappointed that you're not teamed up this time. Xaldin asks us if we understand panels, which begs the question if there's any canon implications of panel usage, or if this is just the devs reminding us that we can change our equipment. And finally, it seems like Demyx is the only one of the bunch who acknowledges the truth bomb of someone being terminated at Castle Oblivion. Syx rewards us with a new rank and tells us to check out the new intern, a Moogle who sells lots of useful panels and whose name remains unknown. If there's one thing everyone can agree is great about this game, it's this Moogle right here. The hooded Moogle is iconic, and I won't hear any argument stating otherwise, which is why it's so weird we don't ever see him in the movie at all, making him our first completely cut character. As soon as we reach the new world of Agrabah for the first time for reconnaissance, Xigbar complains about the heat and wants to hurry up and get the work done. A man after my own heart, as they say, despite not having one. He tries to encourage Roxas not to think too much about the morning's bad news, and to get the mission done quickly so they can get back and find out more info. He agrees, but it's obvious that the thought that it might be Axel who died never leaves his mind. Throughout the mission, we get a nice perspective on the state of Agrabah, and it's riddled with hints as to what caused this. The final hint being that the Heartless might be the reason behind its desolate state. If you look carefully, you can actually see how a lot of the areas look like they're in disrepair, and some of the areas we're going to see later on are going to be completely buried in sand, but they're still the same areas from Kingdom Hearts 1 and a little bit of Kingdom Hearts 2. I have plans to go into why stuff like this makes the Disney World so good in a different video, but for now, the main attraction of this mission that was thoroughly removed by the movie are all of Xigbar's quips and jokes that he has in his conversations with Roxas, who promptly passes out from cringe by the end of the mission. Oh, and before I forget, they totally spied on Jasmine and Aladdin here, making these two almost completely removed from the movie. When he passes out, Roxas sees visions of Axel, Xion, and Naminé. In the movie, it's more of a close-up of her lips, while in the game we get a full-on wide shot of her drawing in her room at the mansion in Twilight Town, followed by a "Who are you?" It's unclear if this is Roxas asking Naminé or the other way around, but it's still really interesting. On day 27, the conversation with Xemnas and Saïx as they creepily watch Roxas sleep is mostly the same in both versions, except I did notice that Xemnas doesn't ask about the progress on finding the Chamber of Repose in the movie. A pretty important detail, I'm fairly sure. He also makes it a point that Roxas is a very sleepy guy. Aw. Day 49, the only difference in the conversation between Roxas and Xion on this day is that she says that she wants them to go together to Destiny Islands at some point, and the layout of the seashells she's been leaving behind, 20 in total, almost one for each day he was unconscious, is slightly different. And I shouldn't say conversation because Roxas is still asleep at this point, and Xion is talking to him while he's unconscious. The other promise replacing Sacred Moon for the scene where Roxas wakes up and goes to the gray area only to find nobody is there, and meeting Xion in the clock tower after he wakes up just feels like a weird creative decision because the other promise holds a very significant meaning when it is finally played within the game. Xigbar tells us that every member of Castle Oblivion was eliminated while we were passed out for the past few weeks, and all Demyx says is that he's really glad he dodged a bullet by not going with them thanks to being super lazy. Saïx delivers the news that pretty much everyone sent to Castle Oblivion's whereabouts are unknown, and then tells Roxas to fuck off because he doesn't need to know anything else. If they're gone, they're gone. No point crying over spilt milk. You gotta love Xigbar's dad-isms. Other than the first mission in this set of days, which features some dialogue between Jasmine and Aladdin, and later Aladdin and Abu, that alludes to the mysterious sandstorms that are plaguing Agrabah, the rest of the missions are ones that we will see reused quite a bit in future days. The Organization Emblem retrieval missions, where the organization is trying to test your mobility by having you grab emblems scattered around a given area to fill the mission gauge. The Deserter mission again, but this time in Agrabah, and the Tail Bunker hunting mission, which isn't really the most challenging, but when you return for this mission in a special challenge version, it can be quite time consuming. These missions are sort of shown through screenshots in the movie, but without further context, stuff like the Organization Emblem one just looks weird. Roxas awakes to find Xigbar in the gray area again, asking him why he looks like he's in a bad mood. Roxas is having none of it as he's really convinced that Axel might be gone. For real now. But Xigbar continues to push the idea that a smaller, more tightly knit group might be better for everyone. His fears are affirmed when Demyx rolls up with the worst timing and confirms that everyone who went to Castle Oblivion has indeed died. Also, love how he jokingly refers to Xigbar as Ziggy here. It's such a Demyx thing to do. Xigbar reminds him that even though he dodged a bullet by not going with them, Demyx will now have to work overtime to make up for everyone else's absence, and he wearily claims that he will underachieve twice as hard now. Talking to Xigbar again, he asks Roxas if he's pulling his weight, not that he weighs much if anything at all. Then he gives us a high potion in case we pass out again, which I guess is in response to Roxas passing out on their last mission together in Agrabah. And Demyx reminds us of his own self-inflicted laziness. And off we go to Twilight Town again, this time to mash up some Zits of Darkness. This kind of mission structure will also be reused at least once for every world, I think, to help fill in the runtime of the game, but I will say I definitely prefer this over the Organization Emblem missions because it really makes you think about the importance of magic conservation, and makes you think up really creative ways to reach some of the ones when you run out. At the end of the day, Axel shows up and the conversation during the scene is mostly the same, with some minor differences in delivery. I've started to notice more and more as it goes on with this that a lot of the dialogue in the movie version is really just watered down and more plain. Axel's lines in particular feel like they're lacking a lot in the sass department. It's like vanilla ice cream. The scene is still really good, but Sea Salt, the game version, is better for the most part. Starting off the day a little differently this time, from Axel's perspective, there's the scene where Saïx confronts him about not reporting in, and all of the subject matter is the same, but once again, Axel's quippy responses to his questions are again watered down. "Oh, good to see you too. You're welcome, thanks for the kind words." You're kidding, right? That's like counting grains of dust in a building full of sneezing people. Well, it's nice to know where I stand. Sheesh. Now shifting back to our main character, Axel tells Roxas that as his punishment for not reporting in, he's teamed up with Roxas for the day as a slap on the wrist. There's some more friendly back and forth banter between the two before they decide to head out, but not before doing our usual rounds talking to everyone else in the gray area today. If you've been paying attention, you'll notice that Xion has been absent from the lounge for a few days now, and Demyx says it's likely because she's out on a mission. Upon their arrival, they agree to make this mission quick, and we get a quick flash of Sora and the gang in our memories. In the next area, Pete shows up and Axel, in his infinite wisdom, decides to change our mission to Tail the Lunkhead because it's important for the organization to look into suspicious characters. So for the next 2 to 3 minutes, you're stuck in the worst stealth mission of all time as Pete waddles along at a snail's pace, checking walls for a secret entrance to the Cave of Wonders. After following him all the way there through the desert, we return to our original objective of collecting hearts, since somehow they completely lost sight of him. Later on, while they're sitting on the clock tower having ice cream, you know, the usual thing, Axel tells Roxas that he can thank himself that they can sit there and laugh and eat ice cream again like idiots again, which they completely changed in the movie in such a way that it feels way less clever, because here it's Axel alluding to the fact that Sora is the reason he's able to come back and eat ice cream with Roxas again. As Roxas wakes up on the 73rd day, he looks out into the usual area and notices there's still a distinct lack of Xion in it. When Axel greets him, Roxas oddly refers to Xion as number 14 when asking if he's seen her, probably because Axel is not yet acquainted with Xion, but still a little strange since I believe this is the only time Roxas calls her anything but her name. Since she's been missing for 10 days now, Axel tells Roxas that he will ask Saïx about her. Luxord's been working the graveyard shift. Speaking from experience, that double overtime sucks big time. We trade a blazing shard for a frost shard with Zaldin, then he just tells us to get our ass back to work? What a douche. So we're at Beast Castle for the first time today, the latest world since Agrabah. When Roxas gets there, he hears a roar that we know to be from the beast himself, but Roxas assumes it's the Heartless he's after. After moving some statues and flipping some switches, we make our way into the main hall, and it's there that we fight the Sergeant. After beating it, Roxas hears the roar again, and wonders what it could be since clearly it wasn't from the Heartless he just beat. At the end of the day, Roxas once more sits alone on the clock tower, wondering where his friends are. Axel greets a very sleep-deprived Roxas the next day with some good news. They are teamed up again today to go and find Xion. Roxas asks if he's joking, and Axel says that he's made it all up and to just go back to bed sarcastically. It's the little interactions like this one that really sells their friendship to me. Luxord offers to give Roxas a tarot reading to help in our search for Xion. We synthesize a high potion for Demyx in exchange for combo tech, and Axel tells us that they, probably referring to Saïx, think Xion is in Twilight Town, then gives us a high ether for good luck. Her mission, according to Axel, was to take out a giant Heartless, and for some reason Roxas think that it could be anywhere. Like, no, Roxas, it's almost always the same 2 or 3 spots. Every time. We immediately go to the Sandlot and overhear Hayner and Olette talking about a strange noise coming from the tunnel that Olette heard and ran away from before getting a good look. Axel immediately thinks it could be the Heartless or possibly Shion, who is struggling for survival according to Roxas, and the two go to investigate. In the tunnels past the entrance that leads to the shopping district, you can find that someone has scribbled an ominous message on the wall that alludes to the supposed monster of the tunnel. I am 45% sure it was Olette trying to write a warning, 5% it was Shion, and the other 50% sure it was Pence being a little shit disturber. They get to the spot and there's no sign of any Heartless or Shion, just a conspiracy theory nerd with an old PS2 game reference on a shirt. Pence tells us that the noise was just the vent, and lets us know if we ever need anything, we can just ask him. After going back to the Sandlot again, we overhear Hayner and Olette chatting once again. This time, the topic is about their shifty and secretive friend Pence. It's only hitting me now that Roxas and Axel don't know these two by name and wouldn't know who they were talking about if Pence hadn't told them his name earlier. They also give us a useful hint that Pence was hiding something in the usual spot, so the pair head off to look for it. It ends up being a map of the 7 silly wonders of Twilight Town, and after some thought they decide to ask Pence about it. He agrees to tell us more after answering his 3 riddles. All stupid questions that you'd only know by either looking it up, having a photographic memory of Twilight Town, or my personal favorite, trying every answer until you get it right. Upon answering every question correctly, he tells us all of the wonders are totally fake. He also tells us about the 8th wonder, which is about a tree in the woods. When it's struck, the whole forest seems to tremble and shake. So R and A go off and hit that tree in the woods. They follow a presence toward the mansion, and the rest plays out like you see in the movie. Axel and Roxas fight the Heartless, Shion gets bodied, they beat it, and they go off to the clock tower where Shion tells the two of them that she can't summon her Keyblade anymore. Besides an appropriate change of music, not much has changed during these scenes, but I do want to say that I appreciate that we can finally see a real reaction on Axel's face when he sees Shion without her hood for the first time, signifying the official start of their friendship. Day 75 is the beginning of Roxas and Shion's series of team missions, and it starts with a nice good morning exchange between the two. Sayax is reluctant at first to send them off together when they're already as short-staffed as is, but Axel's counter-argument of 2 half-pints making a whole and Roxas's promise of taking on tougher missions together brings him around to the idea. Zalden is still being rude as fuck. Shion gives us a panacea. Axel warns us to keep things on the down low while we work together so as to not let on that she can't use the Keyblade anymore. He also gives us a special mission to do for all of the extra work we put in the last few days. Today's mission is in Agrabah to investigate the desert cave, and Roxas regales Shion with the tale of how he and Axel found it in the first place. Eventually, they run into Abu being ambushed by some Scarlet Tangos, but after dispatching them, Shion picks up a jewel that the monkey left behind in its hurry. This jewel is later placed into the socket of a stone that triggers 3 identical cube-shaped switches to appear. The two work together to ignite them all, which opens a pathway to the furthest reaches of the cave, where a familiar statue is located. Pete shows up and decides to fight us since he thinks we're here for the lamp that he's been looking for this whole time. Pete uses a lot of his moves from Kingdom Hearts 2, which means he's pretty easy to beat, but the battle causes such a stir that this whole section of the cave starts to collapse, never to be seen again for the rest of the game. The two just barely escape to the desert when they are suddenly encountered by none other than the genie, formerly of the lamp, and Magic Carpet, who thinks he recognizes Roxas, mistaking him for Sora. After a nice little moment discussing the meaning of friends, Genie decides to get rid of the sandstorm that's been plaguing the city with a quick shot of magic, thereby opening up a whole new area for us to explore. While he's doing that, Team Keyblade slips away to keep a low profile. The usual ice cream meetup at the top of the clock tower for day 75 has got to be the biggest offender yet in terms of changes. In the movie, you get a sort of cut-off segment of the friends versus best friends thing, and it kind of paints Axel in a bad light when he says he doesn't have any best friends. Removing Genie out of the context of the scene kind of leaves the viewer thinking this was just some random question proposed by Shion to make up a topic to discuss for the day. versus in the game, they talk about their experience of the day, about Agrabah, and how they met the genie. They talk about how close he seemed to Aladdin, despite them being apart, and Roxas asks him what it's like to have one. Axel says he doesn't know because he doesn't have one, when we as the player know that he has a history with Saïx. At this point, he doesn't consider Roxas and Xion to be his best friends, but it's getting there. Xaldin calls Roxas and Xion amateurs for working together on a mission. Kind of strange. Play nice. What does that even mean? Does he think we're gonna fight? Foreshadowing? The first few of the missions aren't super important in their content, but it's really nice that every single one of them features Xion right there with us. We got an Emblem mission in Twilight Town on day 76, and Shadow Globs in Agrabah on day 77. But on day 78, it's a fun little investigation mission at Beast's Castle. Roxas hasn't been here a lot, and he tells Xion that last time he heard some kind of roaring sound, and it seems they're determined to find out what caused it. During the investigation, they notice footprints and breadcrumbs outside in the courtyard, claw marks in a notably filthy entrance hall, and as they move into the west hall, they hear a voice belonging to Lumiere. The first voice they've heard since coming to what they thought might have been an abandoned castle. I think Roxas peeking around the corner to see him followed by their reaction to the walking, talking candelabra is hilarious and iconic. Not quite as much as another member of their groups is later, but we'll get to that. For now, they decide they need to sneak by to further investigate the rest of the castle. After sneaking by in a less stressful stealth segment than the last, they follow more footprints identical to the ones they found in the west wing, and into a door at the end of a dark hallway, creating a sense of tension for the characters. Roxas' reaction to the beast shows just how terrifying he is to him, which is both ironic and interesting considering he's fought Heartless before. The two of them come to the conclusion that the beast inside is the ruler of the castle, not just from the way he talks about it, but also because it's literally in the name of the location, Beast's Castle, which feels like half a fourth wall break to me. On our way out, you have the option to investigate the 4 doors that line the wall in the entrance hall, and overhear more of the castle servants talking about someone named Belle, and I just love Xion's reaction to Roxas wanting to open up one of the doors to take a peek. It's just... It's great. Day 79 is the extra mission we got from Axel that sees us return to Beast Castle for a heart-collecting mission with Xion. There's nothing super noteworthy about the mission, other than the fact that Cogsworth has decided to safeguard 2 chests in the middle of the entrance hall, making me feel like I'm in Metal Gear trying to grab them while staying out of his line of sight. Honestly, this mission feels like it could have been part of the last one to make the whole thing feel more stealth-focused instead of just the one part with Lumiere, but honestly, I can't even be mad because their reaction to the walking clock here, in comparison to how they reacted to the candelabra, is funny because it feels like it's way less shocking to them, like they've seen it all at this point. Roxas wakes up to the gray area being completely empty for once, and Saïx comes to fetch him saying that Lord Xemnas has summoned everyone in order to witness the first appearance of their Kingdom Hearts. With that out of the way, Axel gives us a lightning shard as a reward for opening up more chests, Zigbar points out the giant heart in the sky is now clearly visible from the windows, and Xion wishes us good luck on today's mission. That mission being the hunt for a Neo Shadow once again at Beast Castle. On their way to find it, they of course overhear Lumiere talking to himself like an idiot again about how Belle and the Beast seem to be fighting, and I like Roxas' little bruh moment when he hears Lumiere doesn't want to be a candelabra. What do you mean the candelabra doesn't want to be a candelabra? They track down the Neo Shadow to the secret passage, beat it in a pretty anticlimactic way, when suddenly 2 more appear. Before they can do anything, the beast suddenly jumps them while saying "not in my house," and somehow doesn't even notice Roxas and Xion when doing this. After he leaves, the two have a rather interesting moment of clarity, having observed the beast defend his castle all by himself. Roxas points out that if their castle, the one that never was attacked, it would be himself and Xion and the rest of the organization who would defend it, and not Xemnas because he was their master. Kind of a little foreshadowing to Kingdom Hearts 2 when you have to beat all the organization members that are left on your way to fight Xemnas. Xion retorts that she doesn't think of themselves as servants to Xemnas, and if the beast is the one defending his own castle, then maybe it's because he has something to protect. Shion and Axel wish us well on our mission, and Zaldin tells us to keep up our training after giving us an iron. The mission for the day is just another random heart collection mission in Agrabah, which in my opinion should have been the first visit to the cancelled Pinocchio world, but beggars can't be choosers. The ice cream scene cuts out some stuff again. In the game, they start asking how each other's missions went. Axel was sent to Beast Castle for recon, and they respond in kind with the details of theirs in Agrabah. Shion's unsure how long they can keep on fooling everyone into thinking she is still collecting hearts with her Keyblade. Roxas assures her that everything will be okay, and Axel claims that they're not exactly stupid. Then they both drop the biggest diss on Demyx's intelligence that it just feels so painful to see left out of the movie, man. Like, I would have loved to hear that particular interaction voiced. You have no idea. They just roasted the shit out of him. Don't ask me why, but I like this little after-work banter a lot because it feels like a real conversation between co-workers. But from that point on, the talk remains mostly the same in both versions. After another sweet good morning greeting from Shion, Sayax promptly approaches the two with two separate missions that need to be completed at the same time today because of two separate giant heartless popping up in different worlds. Thankfully, Axel swoops in mid-conversation, offering to go and preoccupy the one in Agrabah while the two half-pints go to the one in Beast Castle together to stall for more time. Sayax begrudgingly agrees to the arrangement but warns them that this is the final time. With the time limit in place, Shion grows incredibly worried. As a last-ditch effort, Roxas offers to let her borrow his Keyblade for the day to see if it helps her remember how to summon her own. She asks him what he will use instead, and well, he improvises, and gives us one of the greatest memes to ever come out of a Kingdom Hearts game. On our way to the boss's location, they bump into Cogsworth again and overhear him talking to himself about Belle. I don't think I'm alone in saying they should have had more scenes with Lumiere and Cogsworth talking to each other instead of to themselves to make these scenes feel less for the story's convenience, if you know what I mean. The boss in question is the Bully Dog. Not a very difficult fight since Shion wails on it and all we have to do is throw out fire and blizzard spells from a distance, but if anything, it puts you back into Shion's shoes for what she's had to do the last week or so. And it's also a nice callback to our training with Larxene at the start of the game, where she forced us to fight without using the Keyblade. And it's just a shame that we never really got to use the Mighty Stick again after this. After the fight is done, Shion summons her Keyblade for the first time, and the dialogue is pretty much the same, but I hate that they cut out her little jumps for joy in the movie. It makes it feel less, exciting, I guess. I will say that I do kind of prefer the movie version of the ice cream scene for the day, since instead of just casually strolling up to him, the animators decided to make a callback to Sora and Kairi's scene from Kingdom Hearts 1 with a Roxas jump scare. The one minor change I don't like is that Axel refers to the Heartless that he fought as plural in the movie, but the way I interpret it in the game, it felt like he was referring to just the one giant Heartless that Roxas fights on his next visit to Agrabah the next day. It's finally the day after Shion gets her Keyblade back, and both Zaldin and the Hooded Moogle both point out that we're working on our own again for missions. We trade a Shining Shard for a Rune Tech with Demyx and get another bonus mission from Axel. The mission for the day sees us returning to Agrabah to see the conclusion to the Sandstorm storyline. The cause of these sandstorms is the giant Heartless known as the Antlion, which tunnels around beneath the sand and kicks up a whirlwind that flings debris at Roxas. With the enemy defeated, Jasmine and Aladdin breathe a sigh of relief now that peace seems to have suddenly returned, and Genie disappears after jump-scaring Roxas twice in a row. He just walks up and we don't see him twice. Dude, where's your peripheral vision, Roxas? Come on. Day 98 is just another of the organization's little exercises that rips off the Break the Target minigame from Smash 64, but way less exciting. I suppose, if anything, it was cool to smash pots while avoiding Roxas's foot soldiers, the samurai nobody archetype, while doing so, but there's nothing really else worth noting here. It's just a random, one-off kind of mission. I mean, it's fine, I guess. Demyx, Zaldin, and Axel occupy the gray area today, and none of them do much but state really obvious or ambiguous things like Shion already being out on a mission, or offering instruction at a later time, or just wanting a break. At least with Demyx, he's alluding to a day that's coming up really soon. But honestly, the members of the organization don't always have something interesting to say each day, but it's always worth talking to them every time, in my opinion, because you never know how important it might be. Speaking of Demyx, we have a rare team-up mission with him hunting down 4 aerial masters today. There aren't any cool interactions or anything, but it's always nice to have team-up missions with other members. At the clock tower, Roxas asks Shion if her Keyblade is still working, to which she says yes, and insists that it's all thanks to him and Axel. And Axel seems to blush at this very sincere compliment. Hey, if you made it to day 100, then congrats, comment Palpoofer below if you made it this far into the video. Final day in the set is mission number 35, which happens to be my favorite mission to grind heart points on. Lots of Ice Cube type Heartless, so packing all those casts of fire magic really helps. Day 117 opens up with another conversation in Axel's room with his weird middle management / ex-best friend, Sayax. Conversation flows again pretty much the same as the last one, just missing some of the sassy Axel flavoring. I cleared the way to the top for you. Just do me a favor and don't trip on the way up, is one of my personal favorites. I will add that the voice acting and less stiff body language adds to the intensity of their scheming to this scene in the movie version. When Roxas awakes, he is greeted by Demyx and Xigbar, who inform him that Shion and Axel are on a mission together today, and Roxas has teamed up with Xigbar for a mission to a new world. Also, Roxas doesn't like it when Xigbar calls him Kiddo or Tiger. Call it a headcanon, but I think that the reason he gets so angry about these nicknames is because he's so attached to his real name, the name Roxas, since it's one of the only things he has. Demyx trades a power tech with us for an iron. Xigbar tells us to get into gear, and Luxord asks how our game is. Like it's good, actually. It's my favorite game ever. Thanks for asking, man. Sayax awards us with a new rank, which lets us access more stuff in the item shop and synthesize more things with the Moogle. Not exactly important to the lore, but every time you rank up, new stuff becomes available. As you probably guessed from the music and the backdrop shown in the movie screen cap, the new world is Olympus Coliseum. It's a pretty run-of-the-mill investigation mission, but I thought it was interesting that Xigbar explained what makes the organization different from other nobodies, and how they're looking for new recruits to fill out their missing seats. They fight some Heartless, and Phil sees this and seems to mistake Roxas for someone Hercules scouted out for some training. Xigbar leaves before Phil can see him, but reappears to tell Roxas to stick with the mission on his own, since now he doesn't have to sneak around, and in an offhand remark, Xigbar tells Roxas that he cares about his future. Could this be taken as some classic Xigbar sarcasm? Sure, but knowing the stuff we know about him now, I pay extra close attention when he says stuff like this. During the investigation portion of the game, Roxas can see Sora's name on one of the leaderboards. The training Phil has prepared for us is just a simple hit the barrels into other barrels minigame that has no real effect on the game going forward, except a little reward which you'll get to later, but if you want to impress him, you should aim for a score over 100. It seems that Phil is also trying to recruit new people for the Coliseum to help take some of the load off of Hercules, who's been wearing himself out fighting the Heartless and fighting in the games. This is another little thing that sets up for Kingdom Hearts 2. Afterwards, Roxas leaves to RTC and walks past Hercules, who enters the vestibule, and in an off-screen moment, Phil praises Roxas for his efforts to his champion student. One small thing they left out of Shion and Axel's conversation at the clock tower at the end of the day is that Shion mentions maybe the memories she's been having are hers, but it just feels weird that they belong to her. Day 118 is the one and only vacation day for the organization, and half of them aren't even alive for it. I guess Xemnas isn't so evil that he can't give out days off every once in a while, which is kind of ironic if you think about it. I love that when Roxas reads the notice, he's completely oblivious to what a vacation even is, so he goes and asks his best friends Axel and Shion what their plans are. Axel decides to sleep all day, and Shion chooses to go and get better with the Keyblade by practicing with it, even offering to let Roxas join her, but he declines. He wanders around the castle pretty aimlessly at first, then decides that what he wants more than anything right now is some of his favorite ice cream, so he heads to Twilight Town. There, he runs into Pence and Olette, who are cheering on Hayner as he tries out for his new Grand Standard record. Hayner doesn't seem to warm up to Roxas quite as quickly as the other two, but they ask him to try out Grand Standard for himself, and if you manage to score about 100 points, you really impress them and even unlock another mission for later. Hayner, having seen this amazing performance, gains some respect for Roxas, who still hasn't shared his own name, but before they can invite him to hang out some more, Roxas departs for the clock tower, where the movie then picks up with Axel and Shion showing up to share some ice cream with him like they always do. The scene with them, and later the one with Sayax and Axel, are pretty much the same, just some music changes and slight line alterations, but nothing really major. Xigbar gives us a Gust Shard for going the extra mile in some previous missions, Luxord grants us access to another special mission for upgrading our Keyblade, and Xaldin just tells us to keep getting stronger because he hates our guts. Speaking of Xaldin, today's the first mission where he and Roxas team up to investigate the Beast Castle together. He tells Roxas that the organization has reason to believe the whole castle is cursed to be different objects and creatures. The two explore the castle from top to bottom in every nook and cranny, some of them being the spots as a previous mission to this place, but I'd like to highlight some of the ones that aren't. When you investigate the giant door leading to the bridge in the courtyard, Xaldin points out that this is the only entrance to the castle, the only way in or out, and he asks us to remember it well, because if a giant Heartless were to attack, it would be from here. If only they knew. If only they knew. In the ballroom, Roxas points out that there's a balcony outside the doors. Fascinating, Roxas. Can you see anything else? Not really. Just the stars. They're pretty. Anything else useful, damn it? In the East Wing, Cogsworth is patrolling the hall and somewhat guarding two checkpoints. The first is missable since it's behind a chest, but I just like how observant Roxas is of the most mundane things, like how nice the sofa is, or the random cleaning supplies in the West Wing, and then Xaldin reprimanding him for it. Their dynamic is pretty reminiscent of how Vexen was with him in earlier days, and I just really appreciate that they gave that personality type to someone else. The other check is with Belle, who we can see peering into the East Wing bedroom, and Roxas is shocked to find out that she is human since everyone else that occupies the castle isn't. Just like in a previous mission, Xaldin will yell at Roxas for trying to open the same door that Xion did on day 78. It's the little things like this that makes every point worth investigating, I think. When they get to the West Hall, we get that very meme-worthy shot of Xaldin peering at Lumiere from behind a wall as the two of them make their way to the Beast's room. They notice that the Beast is currently not there, and so Roxas' eyes are immediately drawn to what appears to be a shimmering rose in the center of the room. Xaldin uses a passage of darkness to go in for a closer look. After he comes back, the two discuss that the Beast seems like he's fighting to protect something or someone important. Xaldin thinks it's the rose, but Roxas leans more towards it being Belle, which is also what we as the player think. This argument is reinforced when you get the option to reinvestigate both Belle's room and the Beast's room for your final checks. Afterwards, Xion and Roxas meet up alone atop the clock tower since Axel is still away on his secret recon mission, and the two talk about Roxas' mission with Xaldin. The movie somehow cut out the fact that they even went to Beast Castle at all, and boiled down everything to just not understanding what Xaldin meant by important things being a weakness. I really don't like this, and I really wish that they had included the Disney worlds a little bit more. Seems like Roxas is asking around to find out where Axel might be on his secret mission, and since even Luxor doesn't have a clue, it gives the players context that it's not just Roxas who's out of the loop on some things. Xigbar and Xaldin offer some words of encouragement and basic common sense. Thanks a lot, guys. Day 120 sees Roxas return to Olympus Coliseum for a heart collection mission. After he takes care of the ones outside, Phil runs out to beg Roxas to help take care of the claim armor that's inside the arena. A pretty tough Heartless that's basically a larger large body, but before going in he gives him some classic Phil wisdom. And after that warm-up, as Phil puts it, was done, he starts Roxas up with some more training. The training is an improvement of the first time we came here, with a fun minigame of smashing barrels into Heartless rather than into just more barrels. This can be extremely satisfying and also a good way to farm some heart points while filling the mission gauge. After putting in all that work, Phil almost compliments Roxas to his face this time, but instead decides to humbly brag to Hercules once again off-screen. At the end of the day, Xion and Roxas eat ice cream without Axel once again. Days 121 and 122 are both missions to Olympus again. Nothing plot-wise happens neither, and they're both referenced within screenshots in the movie, just another deserter elimination mission and a fun little outing with Xigbar to stop the Morning Star, which is always nice since he's kind of my favorite organization member outside the trio. And on both days, Xion and Roxas are once again eating ice cream by themselves without Axel. Xigbar is concerned about whether or not we're keeping up with our training, so he asks us to score at least 100 points on the barrel minigame from day 119, and because we did, we got a little bronze as a reward. Xaldin is our first indicator of the imposter who's going around wearing the coat of the organization. We know this is Riku, of course, but it's still weird that in the game he is the first person to tell Roxas about the rumor. Demix complains that Xion's hard work ethic is making him look even worse, but he's happy for her all the same. Today is the first mission to Halloween Town, and after the short world intro, we cut to a Jack Skellington who's deep in thought, pondering over how to make this year's Halloween something truly special. After smacking around all the Heartless, including the incredibly annoying Hover Ghost, Roxas goes to RTC only to be interrupted by the mischievous trio of Lock, Shock, and Barrel with a pumpkin bond straight to the face. Caught off guard and confused as to what just happened, Roxas leaves back the way he came, and Jack happens to notice this time. And that's when his brand new first idea comes in. We will see the culmination of that first idea upon our next visit. Before the mission fully ends, we cut away to Lock, Shock, and Barrel in the graveyard plotting to get Roxas again the next time they see him, and Barrel notices something strange in a dark corner that he urges the other two to come and see. The scene with Shion and Sayax isn't different except for the change of music. Thank goodness for that. Axel just got back but feels like he already needs a vacation. Like, dude, same. Thanks for letting me know ahead of time that I'm with your lame ass today, Zalden. Speaking of, it seems like Zalden is in quite a rush to finish this one for some reason, despite usually being super thorough with his work and being in the Beast Castle, which is his, special interest. It's becoming more clear now. The target is a giant shadow Heartless, and all of the Heartless on the mission itself are shadows, which means no hearts are obtained for the mission. I don't know what canonical reason the organization puts Roxas on these kinds of missions for when he's supposed to be collecting hearts, but here we are. After they finish the boss and are just about to leave, they hear the beast roar and decide to go and investigate to Zalden's excitement. Seriously, he's just a bit too interested in the beast for my taste. As they approach the beast's door, they overhear the beast talking to himself about the rose, and they find out that this rose must be linked to why him and the rest of the people in the castle have taken on such bizarre forms. Xigbar tells us that he looks into Shion's eyes and sees determination, thereby confirming that she is Frisk Undertale. Luxord is just mumbling some nonsense about games to himself again. Axel gives us a shield tech for continuing our tradition from Mission 1 of opening as many chests as possible each day, and when Roxas arrives in Twilight Town, he chooses to look up at the clock tower and spots Shion from afar, then goes to meet her atop it. It turns out both her and Roxas were sent here on separate missions at the same time. There's a bit of an awkward silence between them for a moment, and Shion apologizes for avoiding him the past couple of days. She's been so distressed over failing a mission to take out Riku, and the fact Sayax called her a mistake. After apologizing to her for Sayax's comment, Roxas proposes that they double up their missions and get them both done together so they can finish up faster. Roxas was assigned to defeat the Avalanche, and I guess Shion's mission was just to collect organization emblems, which, as we know from previous missions of the same kind, is to show off your mobility. And in my headcanon, Shion was assigned this mission because she was too slow to defeat Riku. As they're about to go home, they decide to go back to the clock tower for some ice cream, although Shion doesn't seem too enthusiastic about the idea. Nothing extremely different happens in this scene worth noting, except one. I think the movie is always more expressive with the scenes it does remember to recreate, and it's really nice to show how angry Shion is by having her hand Roxas her unfinished ice cream, and have him looking sadly at it because we know, if you've been paying attention, eating ice cream is Roxas's ideal of friendship, and to have this pushed back and unfinished probably created this idea in his mind that their friendship was being strained and falling apart. Zalden gives us his trash combo tech that he doesn't want, then he drops one of the hardest lines he will ever say. You don't need a heart to know how to manipulate one. Which I think is such a crime that we never see this pop up anywhere in not only the movie, or in just general discussion within the community. Like, damn. Xigbar tells us that he hopes Shion can do fine on her mission today since it's apparently pretty tough, and Demix is just wondering when their next day off is gonna be. The day's mission takes us back to Halloween Town, and the first thing we notice is Jack's invention of the week, a balloon that has a terrible surprise inside. We can also see Jack discussing his idea with Dr. Finkelstein, and the doctor tells him that if he has any other ideas, which he will, as you'll come to find out, to let him know about them. Later, when you reach the graveyard, you can see Jack talking aloud to himself because he feels like the balloons are still missing something. Then Zero shows him that a Heartless was hiding in a nearby balloon, which gives him a good hint of what he'll do next, and as a reward, Jack gives Zero a bone from his pocket. It's never explicitly explained why a Heartless appeared in the balloon, but my headcanon is that it might have actually been something to do with Pete. They just forgot to include a scene of him. This scene is helpful because it shows us that Zero can sniff out the spots the Heartless are hiding out in on the map if we give him bones that are scattered around. Of course, you can choose to just search the spots yourself if you already know where they are, but I think this is a fun little gimmick that cuts through some of the monotony of these missions in a positive way. While searching the graveyard, Roxas gets hit with another grenade to his cranium by those blasted kids. The conversation atop the clock tower for this day features Roxas and Axel only. We get a somewhat pleasant but also quite dated guy talk regarding Shion and her frustration towards Roxas. Axel explains to Roxas that girls are complicated and real people are twice as complicated because of their hearts, giving them complex emotions. Shion being a nobody is apparently only a single dose of complicated, as he puts it. He assures Roxas that she'll come around eventually and to not bother her any further until she does, as doing so would just push the wrong buttons. Their guy talk concludes with a joke and a laugh as the sun fades away. Luxord offers us a game where if we scored 50 points in the Grand Standard minigame, which we did on Mission 37, he will give us an extra heart collection mission to Beast Castle. The day's mission sees us partner up with Demyx, who is hilariously upset that he has to tag along for a combat-oriented mission at Olympus, and despite Demyx being the senior, Roxas actually takes charge for this one. As they approach the door to the Coliseum, Demyx asks him if it's really okay to go inside since the organization likes to keep a low profile, but Roxas tells him it'll be fine so long as he pretends to be there for training like Roxas has been doing so far, and well, Demyx hates that idea because it involves sweating, which is gross. Seriously, can't believe they cut out comedy gold like this. Demyx decides that maybe it would be for the best if they split up, to cover more ground, but quietly tells himself that while Roxas is hunting some Heartless, he will just hunt down a spot to take a nap. Roxas goes into the arena alone and sees Phil is currently training Hercules, and he is being a lot harder on him with his training than he is with Roxas. Demyx comes by, admits this, and proclaims Phil a tyrant after seeing what he's making Hercules do. He asks Roxas if he's done already, so they can leave, but he hasn't even started yet. Afterwards, it's Roxas' turn with training, with more smacking barrels into Heartless. It's a little tougher than last time, but nothing too difficult. Overall, the movie does a decent job at explaining the rest of it. Phil is tougher on Hercules because he has high expectations for him, and Roxas sees the parallel with himself and the organization having high expectations for him, a very specific callback to Xigbar's line from their first mission to this world, where he said he's very invested in Roxas' future. The mission complete, Roxas goes to RTC with Demyx, who is politely waiting for us, and he asks him what sort of missions the organization usually has him do, to which he responds, recon. This is a nice nod to what we see him doing in Olympus in Kingdom Hearts 2, sneaking around and taking the Olympus Stone, but doing his best to avoid combat because that's not what he excels at. I guess the organization just doesn't really have the highest expectations for him. At the end of the day, Roxas eats his ice cream alone. Day 154 is our first trip to Wonderland, and it almost perfectly mirrors Sora's first arrival to this world in Kingdom Hearts 1, with the White Rabbit running along saying he's late and the doorknob telling Roxas how to shrink. I love that Roxas' reaction to the talking doorknob is sort of unsurprised, since at this point he's seen a clock and candelabras do way more. The rest of the mission is just heart collection, featuring 3 new kinds of prismatic melodies and a lurk lizard to top it off as an introductory boss for this world. Axel joins Roxas for his ice cream this time and lets him know that they've been keeping Shion and him pretty busy lately to help reassure him that he's not being totally left alone. Luxord says that finding yourself stumped is all a part of playing games, whatever that means. Day 155, Roxas teams up with Zaldin to hunt and defeat the Solid Armor. And Day 156 is the Heart Collection mission to Beast Castle we got from Luxord that has you team up with Xigbar. I hate to be the guy that reads too much into things, but considering how Luxord talks to Xigbar in this one scene in Kingdom Hearts 3, makes me wonder if he gave Roxas this mission for a reason because he just doesn't want to be near Xigbar. Xigbar rewards us again for doing so well with our training with Phil, this time with the Blazing Gem. Axel tells us Shion already left for her mission, so she's probably still avoiding us, and Demyx reminds us that hunting missions aren't really his thing. Like, dude, we know. We get it. We know. Roxas appears in the ballroom of the Beast Castle, immediately hears the roar, and knows right away that it's none other than the Beast himself. Thanks to the barrier placed on every other room, we know immediately that we should head outside to the courtyard. The Beast's roars can be heard from the bridge, and then suddenly, he is sent flying and crashing before Roxas' feet. What could possibly stop the Beast? Just like Zaldin hinted at a prior mission to this world, Roxas goes to the bridge and is met with the world boss, a giant siege-like machine Heartless with archers atop it. The Infernal Engine is a pretty tough fight with a lot of tricks stored under its hood, and the archers atop it just adds to the frustration of it all, but honestly, I'm just obsessed with how this boss was introduced and how the fight is laid out despite it being very rage-inducing. The presentation is just top tier once you get past that. After vanquishing it, we leave Tar TC just in time to see Belle come to comfort and care for the beast. This is meant to be reminiscent of the moment in the film where a similar fate befalls the beast after he fends off some wolves, protecting Belle. It's a really touching scene that shows just how much the beast cares for Belle and the other residents of the castle, and it serves as Roxas' introduction to the concept of love, even though a wild Xaldin appears to tell him how ridiculous the notion of love even is. Like, damn. Who hurt you, man? I really want to know. Like, did someone in Radiant Garden break up with Dylan? Is that what happened? Or something? Maybe? Theories, I don't know. Roxas goes to the usual spot at the clock tower, and when Axel shows up, he, somewhat hesitantly, asks him if he knows what love is. He knows it's something powerful, which Axel confirms, but he reminds him that it's also a feeling, and as nobodies with no heart, they can't feel it. For some reason, the movie says Roxas got no answers, but to me at least, it felt like Axel gave him one, no matter how awkward and roundabout of an explanation it was. Once again, the movie gives a rushed and stupid explanation for a pretty important scene. As Roxas wakes up and reports for his daily mission, he's greeted by Luxord in a similar fashion as when he had his first missions with other members of the organization during his first week. I love Luxord and his stupid gaming puns, but Roxas doesn't like that he's seemingly the last person to learn that Xion has failed yet another mission and is now comatose. Worried sick for her, Roxas begins to run to her room to check on her, but is stopped by Sayax. He tells him that there's no point in going, and that he has a mission to take care of first. Despite his insistence that he can't do anything for her right now, Roxas is adamant on being with her and pushes past him. As he leaves, Sayax calls out to him once more, calling Xion a thing, taunting him for caring so much about a nobody, and tells him that even if she fails, it won't affect Roxas' standing with the organization. Roxas retorts and runs to check on her anyway, and for the first time, he's starting to show a real sense of independence from the organization by disobeying direct orders. Roxas goes to Xion's room and leaves a singular seashell for her, the same one she left for him when he was in this same situation. There's a couple of tiny differences here between the movie and film that don't really matter, but I'll tell you anyway. Xion's right arm is resting on her chest in the game, but isn't in the movie. And Roxas places the shell right by her head in the movie, while in the game, he puts it more closely to the edge of the bed. I know, pretty insignificant changes, but I thought I'd mention them anyway. Luxord tells us he's good to go whenever, Xigbar offers some half-assed consoling, and Demix actually makes a pretty good point about why recon is an important task by using Xion's case as an example. Luxord and Roxas arrive in Wonderland, where most of our missions with him will take place from now on, since there is no Caribbean world in this game for him to be set up for. This one just makes the most sense for him with the cards and the riddles and stuff. Roxas tells him about the white rabbit he saw as the two begin their mission, and they immediately head into the Lotus Forest to find 4 of the 5 pink concertos that they are targeting that are hiding within the flowers that Sora used in Kingdom Hearts 1 to grow and shrink. The Cheshire Cat is there to lend some helpful hints in the form of riddles to find the 5th inside of the birdcage in the Queen's Castle courtroom that Alice was held captive in Kingdom Hearts 1. After wrapping up, he appears once again, spitting more seemingly cryptic nonsense before disappearing again. Luxord tells Roxas that while he doesn't see it happening anytime soon, he will eventually have to outwit that cat in a game of give and take. At the clock tower sit Axel and Roxas once again without Xion, and they discuss the events that transpired this morning between Sayax and Roxas. Roxas wonders why Sayax hates her so much, and Axel, bewildered, asks him how he does it. How does Roxas act so heartsick, talking like a real person? And it's true, Roxas does feel worried for her. Roxas also tells him that Sayax called her broken, and he responds with one of the most depressing comebacks ever that somehow flies under Roxas' radar. Like, dude, your best friend just said he's more broken than Xion is, and you just ignore it just so you can keep shit-talking Sayax? Unbelievable, oh my... Anyway, Axel says he will talk to Sayax about Xion on Roxas' behalf since he's more likely to listen to him, and the two watch the sunset hoping that she will wake up soon. Something worth noting about the following scene where Axel confronts Sayax about her is that after it happens, we get a quick shot in both the movie and the game where a second seashell is shown next to Xion. If we take it as fact that Roxas's plan is to leave one seashell a day for every day she's asleep like she did with him, then it's implied that Axel is the one who left this seashell and not Roxas, since this all occurs on the same day. I hadn't really given this much thought before until my good friend Neosai pointed it out while doing research for his own upcoming video that I may or may not be a part of. Just wait. And just goes to show you that despite what some people say, Axel really does care about her, and it's not just a mutual friends thing with her because of Roxas. Oh, also, the seashell is different in the movie, and Shion actually stirs a little bit in her sleep in the game. You know, just more tiny, insignificant details I noticed. Axel greets Roxas the following morning to tell him that he did talk to Sayax, but his lips were sealed. He also lies to him about Sayax, saying that he would take back calling her broken if she proves herself in the future, but, you know, only to make him feel better and get him back to working hard. This is where the real deception of Axel begins to form as he tries to keep his friendships from crumbling. Luxord gives us yet another one of his games of synthesizing the chrono gear from a list of ingredients he made, then rewards us with a shining gem. And if we equip that same weapon with some link panels and talk to Axel, he gives us permission to go on another mission from Sayax, now saying that we are prepared to handle it after upgrading our Keyblade. Demix makes a reference to an American short story called Rip Van Winkle. I'd never really heard of it, but basically he's just pointing out that Shion's fallen asleep and has been asleep for a while. If you think that this is irrelevant, it's not really anymore, because Nomura made another reference to an American short story recently, and it was around the time I was recording this portion of the video. So, there you go. Halloween Town again, yay! And with all the bones lying around, it's obvious that Roxas will partner with Zero again to hunt down Hidden Heartless. In the graveyard, Jack is showing off some of the lamps he and the Dr. Finkelstein collaborated on to the ghastly dog, then leaves in a hurry as he's running late to a meeting. After lighting all of the lamps, Roxas makes his way to the Moonlight Hill through a secret passage in the graveyard, where he once again gets face-bombed by the trio of troublemakers. He's had enough of them at this point, and I have too, and decides to teach them a lesson by beating the shit out of them. After the battle, Roxas confronts them and asks why they were blocking the way, and Beryl nearly lets it slip that they might have been hiding something, but the other two quickly cover for him, saying it was just a prank, bro, before bombing Roxas once again to make a clean getaway through a nearby wall. On the other side of the wall, Jack hears the explosion made by the two and is startled enough to get a brand new idea that we will see in action upon our next visit. Using the bones strewn about, Roxas locates and destroys all the Heartless before leaving to meet up with Axel for some ice cream. Day 174 features Roxas' first trip to Neverland, and as he looks around for the wave crest that he is targeting, he stumbles upon Captain Hook and Mr. Smee digging some treasure in a seemingly random spot that Hook found on one of many random treasure maps he acquired somehow. The chest ends up being a dud, but unbeknownst to the ones who discovered it, it is filled with darkness that attracts some nearby Heartless. The darkness seems to strengthen Hook's greed somehow before they turn tail and run. Roxas defeats the Heartless, and when he examines the chest for himself, it's just a lot of junk that may have been a trap setup for the piratey duo. He looks in the direction they ran towards their ship, and decides to pursue. On the ship, they're already plotting a course for the next chest, and Tinkerbell overhears this before flying off. She bumps into Roxas, and a memory of Sora and her flashes for a brief moment. She tries to take Roxas with her to stop Hook and Smee, but he reminds her that, unlike her, he can't fly. Oh, you sweet summer child. Tinkerbell tosses some pixie dust on him and tells him once more to come with her. In an uncharacteristic blind moment of trust, Roxas leaps off from the edge of the cliff and flies for the very first time as the memory of Sora doing the same thing also plays statically. Roxas, elated, wants to follow her, but decides that for the sake of his fake aggrievement with Sayax that Axel made up, he should stick to the mission. He defeats the Wave Crest and goes to RTC, but not without feeling a little worried for Tinkerbell since she went off to the ship by herself. He also has the funniest feeling that he's flown before, but can't quite place it. At the clock tower, he excitedly tells a bewildered Axel about his flying adventure in Neverland and wishes so badly that he could tell Shion all about it too. This was not only the first time we have seen the world of Neverland in a Kingdom Hearts game, not counting Hook's ship in Kingdom Hearts 1, but also the first and only original world in the game. Somehow, this whole day was also completely cut from the movie. Day 175 is with Demix to Halloween Town. Nothing noteworthy or interesting, just a neat little outing to hunt down a dual blade Heartless. Day 176 is the bonus mission Axel put us on from Sayax but it's just an emblem collection mission, so I just really don't see why we need a stronger Keyblade to handle it. Although, I guess the Heartless are a little strong in this one, and there are a lot of them, and that day ends with another brief moment of ice cream with Axel, so I guess it's worth it. The movie thankfully kept in the moment where Xion wakes up from her dream about Sora releasing his heart to save Kairi in Kingdom Hearts 1, which gives us perfect context for the next scene that was completely cut out. Xion and Roxas enter the gray area together and are rudely greeted by Saïx. I love how Roxas puts an arm in front of Xion to shield her from him, and thankfully, with the help of Axel, they convince Saïx to let Xion tag along for their mission for the day. We synthesize the perfect block for Xaldin as an experiment, and he gives us a range tech in exchange. Xion and Axel are both as excited and eager as I am for the first and only 3-man team-up mission within the game. The three arrive via Dark Corridor in Twilight Town, and the banter that ensues between them shows a really good sense of chemistry in the group. Axel warns Xion to take it easy since she only just woke up, and he and Roxas will pick up the slack. The three work together to take out a Barrier Master and Heat Saber combo in the sand lot before making their way to the station plaza for their second target. The following moment with her passing out in the Destroyer fight all plays out like how the movie shows, but the movie does cut out the immediate aftermath of the fight where Xion utters Sora's name in her sleep, and Axel assures Roxas that she's fine and that they should just RTC. The rest of the day, however, plays out exactly the same in both versions, so I'm thankful. Xigbar challenges us to beat 30 enemies with our limit break, and we do, and are rewarded with an extra mission. Luxord utters some more random cryptic shit, and Axel tells us he likes his missions like he likes his ice cream. Xion also just gives us a bronze that she found. So nice of her. The mission is another outing with Luxord to Wonderland, and this time he sees the White Rabbit for himself. The two decide to follow it after Luxord gives some life-changing advice to Roxas. Curiosity is essential to carving your own path through life. Don't you just love that? They follow him all the way to the Queen's courtroom where they overhear the lady herself giving orders to her guards to locate 3 shady individuals. Luxord compliments Roxas on his decision to pursue the rabbit as it may have just helped narrow down the position of their target. After a rather annoying trip through the first hedge maze and defeating all 3 of the commanders, they overhear the Queen losing her temper at her guards for failing to find them and make their short getaway back to home. The scene with Axel poring over Vexen's notes about Naminé remains the same, but for some reason we are missing the ice cream scene with Xion and Roxas that occurs at the same time. Xion apparently got an easy mission, so she got there first. Roxas asks her how she's feeling, and the two sit and share a bar of their favorite treat together, and overhead they hear the toll of the bells of the tower they always sit on signal that it's getting late and that Axel is going to be a no-show. I can't believe they cut out this day of all days from the movie. Like, it's just so iconic. Yes, they give their usual paragraph explaining what happened, but it's just not quite the same. So let me lay it out for you. Axel and Roxas have a mission together in Neverland. They reminisce on the last time they got to talk and hang out like this, just the two of them, and Axel says that time really seems to fly, which reminds him to ask Roxas about the flying thing. Roxas tries to show him how it's done, but fails, making Axel think that maybe he made the whole thing up. Meanwhile, Hook is pissed at finding yet another dead end with his treasure maps, causing his darkness to swell up. Roxas and Axel see this and comment on how all they're really doing is making more Heartless pop up instead of finding treasure. Suddenly, Tinkerbell shows up and she is so pissed at Roxas for not joining her last time he was here. She also seems very wary of Axel for some reason at first, but eventually she dusts both of them with the sparkling glitter. Roxas takes up off the ground and immediately showing Axel that he really can fly, and that he can too if he just believes. When Axel finally does take flight for the first time, it's such a wholesome moment for the two of them. Tinkerbell flies towards the ship once again, but not before Hook and Smee start to open fire on 3 of them with their cannons, thinking that they're heartless. Roxas wants to go and help Tinkerbell this time, but Axel ushers him back to his senses, saying that they need to focus on finishing the mission. Once it's done, they go in RTC, and Roxas once again feels terrible for leaving Tinkerbell to her own devices, even when Axel tries to reassure him. After the pair leave, Pete strolls up to one of the holes the pirates were digging, and says that his plan is working perfectly, but he also can't help but wonder where all of the Heartless have gone. At that evening's ice cream meetup, Axel and Roxas are still talking about the day's mission, wondering if they might be able to find a way to fly in other worlds too. Xion arrives, and Axel grows silent for a moment, showing that he knows something we don't know about Xion. Day 196 is a little trip to Twilight Town for another unique mission where Roxas must acquire 3 Shining Shards. That's it. There's never another material collection mission in the whole game. Sure, you could argue it's just a reskinned Heartless hunting mission, but I feel like if they did more of these, it would help with the monotony of it, and it also helps me feel better about including the bits of dialogue that I have to do with synthesis, since it makes it part of the story technically. And Day 197 is just another trip to Neverland to fight the Avalanche. Nothing particularly worth noting about it, but I guess I could see why Xigbar wouldn't want to fight this thing. Oh, and at the end of the day, Roxas eats his ice cream alone. Axel very sarcastically wishing us luck with today's Demyx team-up mission is comedy gold. And speaking of Demyx, he asks us to find every Heartless for him in Mission 52 because Saïx has been hounding him about it. It's just so like him to shove his extra work onto other people. And I also appreciate the added side of Saïx telling Roxas to inspire Demyx with our work ethic before we leave for our mission. When they're finally away from Saïx on site for their mission, Demyx immediately starts complaining about having to go Heartless hunting again in the same world no less. Roxas offers to split up like last time, but he's quick to reject the idea since he might end up accidentally coming across it and having to fight it alone. After vanquishing all of the Heartless outside the Colosseum, Demyx chooses to quote-unquote stand guard by the exit. Very smooth. Today just so happens to be the first day of the games in the Colosseum, and Phil is eager to see what Roxas can do, giving his usual pep talk and words of wisdom before our first match, and we get a little flashback to Sora and the gang after. The matches are what you usually expect from Kingdom Hearts: Heartless, Heartless, and more Heartless. Some things just never change. After making our way to the finals, Phil pulls Roxas aside for one final pep talk because apparently our final challenge is pretty tough. It's during this talk that Roxas learns the difference of expectations and orders. Phil's expectations of him comes from a place of pride in his student, clearing up any misconceptions Roxas had from his previous missions to this world. The final match, to the surprise of many, is none other than Xigbar. Maybe this whole time that he's been pushing us to do well at the Colosseum was so that he could test Roxas' strength in an official match without giving away his ulterior motives. The fight, as cool as it was, is cut short since the target in the form of the guard armor arrives on the scene to disrupt the finals. Phil runs to fetch Hercules to deal with it, but Xigbar turns and leaves Roxas to face the fight on his own as memories of Sora's first time facing this exact foe play over in Roxas' own battle. It's a really cool moment that ends with Xigbar complimenting Roxas on his efforts, and Demyx giving his usual excuse as to why he didn't help out. Overall, Olympus has its usual appealing world arc, and there's still just a little story left to come from it. As Demyx and Roxas leave through a dark corridor to RTC, Phil finally comes back with Hercules in tow, only to find that the Heartless, as well as his contestants, have all vanished, and the two of them finally come to the realization that Phil was training the wrong person this entire time. The one he was supposed to be training, that Herc scouted personally, hadn't even arrived yet. It's a real knee slapper, honestly. Roxas meets up with Xion on the clock tower, and Xion's mission was, again, pretty easy apparently. Roxas begins to tell her about what Xigbar did on his own mission before Axel arrives and oddly asks what Xion was doing there. It's a very brief moment of intensity before things calm back down, and they all start eating ice cream together again. The lead up for this scene was all cut for some reason, but the rest of it, starting with Xion asking about Castle Oblivion, was left in. I just think it's a weird thing to cut out since it sets the tone for this whole conversation that evening so well. Demyx once again asks us to help him out with some of his extra work and rewards us with even more work in the form of a special mission from Saïx. Axel also gives us an extra special mission from Saïx after seeing how strong we've become lately. The mission for the day is simple: track down the carrier ghost, beat it in RTC. What could go wrong besides another pipe bomb to the face from those blasted kids once again upon arrival? I mean, it's like it's on site with these guys, I swear. Meanwhile, Jack and the Doctor have just finished making an ice variant of the pumpkin bombs we've seen around town lately. Finkelstein asks Jack if he's seen the trio of mischief makers around lately since he's heard from Sally that they're up to something on the outskirts of town. Speaking of, Lock, Shock, and Barrel appear to be cornered by something in some unknown area of the world, and as Roxas approaches the point to RTC, he's ambushed by this same mysterious creature known as a Tentaclaw. He defeats it without too much trouble, and surprisingly, no hearts release from it. From there, he decides it's important to tell Saïx about this incident before meeting up at his usual spot with Xion. However, Xion decides she's not in the mood for ice cream and just leaves instead. Just when you think he's gonna eat ice cream alone, Axel shows up to keep him company like a good friend would. Roxas tells him he just missed Xion, who was acting pretty weird, in hopes that they can make that trip to the beach happen very soon. Instead of going to her room like she said she would, Xion appears to be at the organization's main computer looking up a mysterious file. This is where the iconic Gamer Xion gif comes from. Demyx is such a mood here. I think we could all use a vacation. So that's why we never have another day off. Which begs the question, why was Saïx in such a good mood on day 118? So our extra mission from Demyx is a team-up mission with Xion in Wonderland taking out some Shadow Globs, which is some pretty tedious work. I can kind of see why he wouldn't want to do it. The other mission that we do on day 227, however, is the one we got from Axel, which was also pretty tough. It's a team up with the Redhead to Neverland to stop an Emerald Serenade. This is one of 3 of this very same mission, and honestly it's one of the worst in the game, especially if you have no idea what you're doing. Today makes 255. Thanks for watching so far. Please subscribe, I'm losing my sanity here. In this initial scene with Xigbar, Xemnas, and Saïx, it goes pretty much word for word until this one line Xigbar says about Saïx having no heart. I vastly prefer the game's version where he says, "If people see with their heart, Saïx, then you're blinder than the rest of us." Like, that is such a cool line, and it sounds like something his old teacher would say. Xion and Axel's scene in Castle Oblivion is the same. A+. For the ever so special day 255 that kicked off this game's opening scene, it's just a normal mission with Luxord to Wonderland again. We start off with some usual game-related yapping from Luxord, and a very deep in thought Roxas. The Queen of Hearts is doing her usual act of threatening her card soldiers if they don't locate the Heartless this duo beat on their last mission here, which is pretty funny in hindsight, because they're still looking for it. You get the joke? Do you get it? Then the Cheshire Cat appears like he usually does, and gives us a semi-useful hint as to where our new target could be in the form of a riddle. Stealth missions suck in this game. They're slow and dull, and it's so frustrating if you accidentally step into the red sight cones. So we'll just say that they flipped all 4 switches hidden in a maze, beat the Nova Shadow, and RTC'd. That scene that played at the start of the game plays out again here in full, and now we have the context of who Roxas was expecting to show up. After sitting there all afternoon, Axel finally says that he doesn't think Xion will show, and lies to Roxas for the second time that she is on a very important mission and won't be back until it's done. I love that they chose to leave this scene in, because when the music cuts out, the mood shifts and it contrasts perfectly to the laughter and smiles that were on their faces just seconds before, thereby adding a sense of tension to Axel's white lie. The movie does a decent job summarizing what happens in this initial scene, with Xemnas calling a meeting to announce that Xion has left, but of course there's nothing quite like seeing the meeting in its entirety for yourself. Demyx asks for clarification in his usual Demyx way, and Xaldin wonders what would drive her to do something so foolish. Xemnas at first forbids anyone from searching for her, and Roxas lashes out in frustration at this. Saïx is quick to remind him that Xemnas' orders are absolute, and he should be thankful that they aren't going to punish her. Xemnas says that they'll deal with it when the time comes, and Axel tells himself that if the time doesn't ever come, then things can just kinda stay as they are. After the meeting, we talk to Luxord, who might be subtly encouraging Roxas to go search for Xion anyway, which is interesting, but Xigbar and Demyx don't really offer anything interesting as to what just happened. Roxas arrives in Halloween Town for his mission, and notices a distinct lack of balloons and Heartless. He moves onward to the town square and is just in time to see another one of those tentaclaw things eating a Heartless. He fights through them all and makes his way to the Moonlight Hill. When he gets there, he sees Lock, Shock, and Barrel leap over a nearby wall, seemingly running from something. Their dialogue makes it easy to guess that whatever Barrel found on day 149 grew to be something quite monstrous. After fighting even more Tentaclaws, Roxas chooses to investigate the place the trio just came from, and comes across one of the most frustrating bosses in the entire game, the Leechgrave. I could go into great detail on how this boss has ended many playthroughs for so many new players, but all you need to do is ask anyone who has played this game ever and they will tell you. Want my advice? Learn to stun the Tentaclaws with a well-timed block, and bring so much fire and fire magic you're practically swimming in it. Roxas defeats the foe, and Jack watches from afar, and of course, gets one final big idea to help with his Halloween plans. This idea is cobbled together so quickly that we get to see it on our way to RTC. It's a scarecrow that's a mix between the Tentaclaws and Roxas himself. I love Jack's description of the thing, especially the countless batteries of bombs, which is probably a nod to the amount of fire magic he just saw us use to beat the thing. You also gotta love how unflattered Roxas is by the scarecrow being made in his image. On our way out, we get one final pumpkin bomb to the face, but it's weird. That one almost felt like a thank you. Almost. At the clock tower, Roxas eats alone, saying that Axel could have shown up at least, which he did, but Roxas may never know that. Man, I love Luxord's philosophy on life. I love video games too. Our mission to Wonderland is with Xigbar for a change, and it's to take down another of those Emerald Serenades. It sucks, but this one is probably the easiest of the three of this kind of mission. At the end of the day, Roxas once again sits alone, wondering where Axel could be. This next day, 258, is just a heart collection mission to Agrabah, probably just as a way to remind the player that this world exists. There's just not really any more story to be had here though. Although having the enemies be mostly loudmouths and solid armors is some nasty work. This is the first day in a while that's only cutscenes and no gameplay. All of the scenes remain the same, but I did want to draw your attention to one slight difference. When Axel asks Roxas if he wants to go looking for Xion, in the game he seems hesitant and reminds Axel of Xemnas' orders to not do that, showing us, the player, that he still has some of that unwillingness to go against a direct command and think for himself, but in the movie he just kinda says, huh? Like, come on man, come on. Demyx is getting swamped with all of Xion's extra work since her disappearance and asks us to help out by giving us one of his assigned extra special missions from Sayax. Axel reminds us to go looking for Xion after our mission, and Luxord knows we're up to something and that our poker face is awful. The Cheshire Cat greets us in the hallway in Wonderland, meaning he's at a full normal size right now. He asks us if we're alone today, and I love how Roxas is just so tired of this damn cat. He asks if Roxas is off to see the new Shadow, and in what feels like a continuity error, Roxas responds by asking if there is a Heartless here. Like, dude, that was in your mission brief, that's why you're here today. Roxas enters the bazaar room, and the cat appears once again, and his dialogue is nearly identical to what he said to Sora in Kingdom Hearts 1 when they fought the Trickmaster, which makes sense because this world boss is basically just the Trickmaster times 2 in the form of the Crimson Pranksters. The fight is fierce and annoying since you need to beat them both in succession or else they will just respawn, but it's still not the worst fight in the game. The Cheshire Cat appears one more time to cheer on a victorious Roxas. The movie mentions a question that Roxas asks him, but doesn't say what it was. He asks if the Cheshire Cat is a friend or an enemy, and he responds by simply telling him to believe in his heart and let it decide. And Roxas gets a little upset by this, because at this point, he doesn't believe he has a heart to believe in. At the end of the day, he looks for Xion at the Beast Castle, but can't find her anywhere. We're teamed up with Axel today for the annual Deserters Hunting mission, this time at Beast Castle. This rendition of the mission is slightly more difficult since the Deserters are initially guarded by a Barrier Master, and the end of the mission surprises you with an invincible encounter that isn't needed to complete the mission, but it is guarding the RTC point, so you know. Roxas ends the day by looking for Xion in Halloween Town at the Moonlit Hill, but still can't find her. Day 279 is a test of endurance mission that is a lot tougher than the one from day 15, with the timer being longer and the nobodies being stronger. When I was recording this part, I almost got it done, but then I died in the last 0.78 of a second. You can probably imagine my reaction to that. This is also the one day Roxas doesn't look for Xion afterwards, or at least not that we can see. Mission 72 is the one we got from Demyx that has us team up with Luxord to fight 2 dual blades in Halloween Town. I can see why he wouldn't want to do this, not just because he's Demyx, but it's also just very similar to another mission we did previously with him on day 75. The only difference is instead of creepworms, there's skater bombs, and instead of just 1 dual blade, there's 2. Roxas searches for Xion in Agrabah, and as luck would have it, he still can't find her. Xaldin is getting in on our little unofficial chest opening contest with Axel, which we beat and are rewarded with the Blazing Crystal. It seems that Xigbar is also aware of us looking for Xion after work based on this. Axel is still helping with the search, of course. Roxas is ordered to enter the games again, and this time Phil is more than happy to let him in, despite finding out Roxas really isn't the one Herc sent to get training. Phil also starts to ask him who he really is and who sent him, which makes Roxas fall silent and feel uncomfortable. But before he can make up a little lie, the satyr tells him it's okay because everyone has a secret or two. The games this time around are a lot less difficult, and they end with a solid congratulations from Phil, and when they begin to part ways, he tells Roxas that he's here if he ever wants to talk. Roxas arrives in the gray area just as Sayax is telling Axel about the mysterious imposter being spotted near Castle Oblivion. Roxas is quick to volunteer to go as it might lead to finding Xion, but Sayax warns him that he can't go alone because this target is just too challenging. Axel agrees to go with him, and the two set off together with some encouragement from their middle management. The scene with Roxas and Axel in Castle Oblivion in the movie is superbly done, and the only real difference is that Roxas falls to his knees once the memories start flooding in, and he completely passes out before Axel gets him out of there, while in the remastered scene, he's still somewhat conscious. The scene following that one, where Roxas wakes up, is also pretty much the same. Slight difference on Axel's part, where in the game he flat out refuses to return to Castle Oblivion after what happened, and he also has his back turned to Riku and Xion when they appear, making it much cooler when he senses they are there. While the music for this scene is an absolute banger, it also kicks off at the worst time in the remaster. In the game, it doesn't start until after Riku starts running away. When Roxas sees Xion for the first time in a while and she doesn't say anything to him, the silence between them really matters, and I feel like the music kind of ruins that, but only a little bit. Also, Riku walking away instead of sprinting in the movie feels kind of silly. Roxas is going full sprint after him in both parts here, and Riku just walks, which isn't very good at showing what the player has to go through in the game, chasing him all over the place as he runs, jumps, and teleports to different spots. The duo goes out for ice cream to talk about what just happened, and Axel tries to assure Roxas that now that they know she's safe, she will come back when she's ready. For once, the day doesn't start in the gray area, but instead one of the many halls in the castle that never was, with Roxas overhearing a conversation with Axel and Sayax. The latter just finished ordering the former to do something about Xion, but when Roxas approaches them to find out more, they leave without another word. Now in the gray area, Roxas will try to talk to Axel again, but he remains silent. When he then approaches Sayax, the only other person in the room, he's quick to tell him that Xion has betrayed them, and they start getting into an argument over it. Axel moseys over to disrupt the debate, and Sayax tells Roxas to go to Twilight Town and take out the imposter on his own, like he expected him to yesterday. He also orders Axel again to go and bring Xion back, dead or alive. I find it weird that the target was too dangerous yesterday for just Roxas to handle, but now it's perfectly okay to send him on his own. Roxas quickly begs Axel not to follow the orders, and he assures him that he will try to think of something on the fly. When he reaches Twilight Town, Roxas starts talking to himself, wondering aloud why Xion is acting this way, when suddenly he sees who he thinks is the mysterious imposter from yesterday, and makes haste to chase him down. The chase sequence is a lot like yesterday's, but instead of just in the tunnel system, it's the whole downtown area. Eventually, the figure teleports to the back alley, and we get that really iconic scene that's shown in the movie between Axel, Xion, and Roxas. After Axel takes Xion away and the scene fades to black, Roxas teleports himself back and rushes to confront Axel about what just happened. This little argument is just one of many to come, and it really shows how realistically their friendship is portrayed. It's not always sunsets and ice cream here. There's fights too. The morning after, there's the scene with Axel and Sayax that they did of course leave in the movie, but then we cut away to Roxas asking Zaldin and Luxord about if they know where Xion is, and they're quick to respond with empty I don't knows. Not getting any proper answers, Roxas decides to take his question all the way to the top of the pecking order and asks Xemnas himself, who is sitting in the meeting area alone. I do like that they remastered this exchange between number 13 and number 1, but in the game I felt like Roxas was trying to pose his questions as a junior meekly asking his superior, but in the cutscene it feels more like he's ordering Xemnas to give him answers. Again, I appreciate that they kept in the little exchange, or lack thereof, between Axel and Roxas after his meeting with Xemnas is done in the movie, because it does a great job of expressing how sorry Axel is on his face. Xigbar asks us to upgrade our weapon again in exchange for some gold. Zaldin ponders over why Xemnas cares so much about something so insignificant, probably referring to Xion because he's still an asshole. The mission is a random shadow glob one in Neverland that's not really important. The rest of the day plays out almost exactly the same as in the movie. For once, the only person besides the Moogle in the gray area today is Saïx with our usual daily mission. Roxas arrives in Neverland for his mission to see Captain Hook and Mr. Smee have captured Tinkerbell in a sack. At first, his immediate thought is to go and help her, but reminds himself that doesn't have anything to do with his mission. Despite this, Roxas resolves to help her after all, since up until now he's done nothing but blow her off time and time again to do his mission, even though she did nothing but help him in return. This is another sign that Roxas is rebelling against the organization's injustice, and it's in large part because of how they've been treating Xion. Roxas approaches the captain's cabin aboard Hook's ship and overhears him and Smee talking about the maps and the treasure that they're after. Hook's greed seems to flare up in his desire for this treasure that only might exist, and as the two leave the cabin to continue their search, Roxas goes into the cabin to let Tinkerbell out of her makeshift cell. Tinkerbell helps him fly again and points him to a piece of a map that Hook left behind. Roxas decides to investigate the spot marked on this map as it might lead him to the Heartless that he's after, since at this point, he thinks the chests themselves that the pirates have been digging up contain the Heartless. Then he gets the idea it's actually Hook that's summoning them, and so he goes to pay the two scallywags a visit just in time to see the Phantom Tail appear. Roxas still isn't sure why it was Hook that was drawing the Heartless, and decides to save it for another day. Meanwhile, Pete investigates the spot they just dug up after Roxas leaves to find the Heartless is missing. Tired of whoever it was who's been defeating all of his Heartless, he decides that next time he's going to give Hook something to really set off his greed meter and summon something much more fearsome. The movie, for some reason, thinks the only important thing to happen on this day is Roxas sitting alone in silence on the clock tower. So let's fix that. Xion gives us a shining crystal along with an apology. Axel seems pretty concerned about us given how our last interaction went, and Zalden lets us in on a new special mission of his own design that Saïx will give us for a later day. The mission for the day is incredibly memorable for all the wrong reasons. Roxas is tasked with destroying a Heartless, but can't make it there without flying. Tinkerbell shows up at the perfect time to help with that, and we make our way to the place where Hook and Smee are digging up the final hole from their series of treasure maps, and Hook is positive that this is the place. Smee ecstatically shows off the treasure he just found, and this triggers Hook's greed to grow stronger than ever, making the chest that was put here by Pete transform into the most formidable and annoying boss of all, Ruler of the Sky. Before the fight starts, however, Pete shows up and Roxas is flabbergasted that he's in this world, when the last time he saw him was in Agrabah. Ruler of the Sky is this world's final boss, and it certainly earns that title. It circles around the area with his tail lagging behind it that you have to break. The problem is the flying speed of Roxas is just barely fast enough to get one or two hits in with his Keyblade, unless you manage to get in front of it, so the best option is to hit it with fire spells, which makes it a very, very long process. He also goes into his DM every time you break a segment of his tail off, which is super annoying because he can heal for every one of this blue orb attack he launches at you that hits. And he relentlessly dives after you no matter what height you fly at. It's just very frustrating, and quite possibly the most frustrating enemy in any Kingdom Hearts game, outside maybe the hooded figure as Terra in Birth by Sleep. Thankfully, defeating it rewards us with one of the funniest scenes in the game. Hook and Smee are trying to make it back to the ship to use the cannons on the giant Heartless, when suddenly it crashes directly into their ship, absolutely wrecking it. It's very satisfying to not only see Hook in complete despair from the damages, but also to see the Heartless vanquish itself in such a satisfying way. Pete runs away for the final time, and Roxas wonders why Pete even wants an army of Heartless in the first place. And then he goes and sits by himself on the clock tower. I don't know why they cut out literally everything from Neverland. It's ridiculous. I'm surprised that this day is completely removed without even so much as a mention by the movie, as it's easily one of my favorite little side missions. The mission is in Halloween Town, and we're meant to meet up with Xigbar, who's already in the field. I think it's incredible that you can see the difference in the number of Heartless that spawn throughout the mission now that the Leech Grave isn't eating them all anymore. After dealing with the ones in the town square, Roxas moves to search in the graveyard when he's suddenly cornered by a swarm of shadows. Then from up in the sky comes a stream of bullets made of light, accompanied by that noise that too many Kingdom Hearts 2 fans know all too well. Xigbar has just saved our butts in one of the coolest ways possible. Roxas tells him that he's here as backup, which he thinks is Saix's idea of a joke, and says that the only thing Roxas will ever save him from is boredom. Together, they clear the map of every Heartless, including some bosses of past missions, until we make it to the area near the suspension bridge beyond the wall. Here, Roxas mistakes a snowy crystal for their target, and Xigbar reminds him to keep his head on straight. Thinking their mission is done, Roxas lets his guard down for just a moment, and is saved by Xigbar yet again from a quick strike by their real target, the Chill Ripper. It's a fun fight, and probably my favorite dual blade variant, honestly. With their mission actually finished now, Xigbar tells Roxas that he's learned a valuable lesson, and the two RTC. Do I like this mission because it features Xigbar, quite possibly one of my favorite organization members ever? Yeah, but that's besides the point. Day 303 is hilarious and one of those unorthodox missions that just doesn't have enough of an explanation. Roxas is asked to go and break some vases in Beast Castle that the organization has set up for him to test his luck, I guess? Some of the vases have really strong Heartless in them in the form of living pods, which are just hover ghosts on steroids. I'd like to imagine that maybe Xaldin was the one that made this mission for us, since it was he that gave it to Saix to give to us, and that's why it's in Beast Castle of all places. I just wonder if the Beast woke up one day, saw all of those vases lying around, and just went back to bed thinking it was just a normal Tuesday. Day 304, it's time for the final Emerald Serenade mission. I usually label it as the most difficult because it takes place in the Queen's Hedge Maze, but somehow I managed to accidentally kill it this time while fighting the other Heartless. I'll take it, I guess. In the game version, Roxas thinks something got into his eyes while he was asleep, which caused his tear, while in the movie he asks what the tear is. I kind of prefer the movie's take on this one, guys. Both Xion and Xigbar are quick to notice Roxas's pale and depressing expression. Xigbar tries to cheer him up by giving him a training goal, which we did, and we got a frost crystal from him for it. Xion and Roxas are assigned on a mission together in Agrabah, and she once again brings up her concern for Roxas, who looks like he's having a rough day after his bad dream, as Xigbar put it. Roxas brushes it off and says she's imagining it, but because of Roxas's weird affliction, your level gets halved for the whole mission. I feel like this is extremely important to helping make the player feel the weight of the situation that Roxas finds himself in, showing it rather than just telling the way the movie does in a summary. Together, the two of them make their way to a new part of the Cave of Wonders, which just so happens to be the same room Sora sealed the keyhole in Kingdom Hearts 1. Xion remembers it, and of course we know it's not her memory, but Sora's. Remembering this, of course, causes her to grow faint, and when she comes to again, we get the bone-chilling line of, "You look so much like him." The movie cuts out this whole moment without even so much as a mention. After that brief, puzzling moment, their target appears, and we can't seem to defeat it. Then it cuts away to one of the coolest Xion moments where she cleaves it in half with the most wicked Keyblade combo. She stops for a moment, wondering how she did that, and then rushes to Roxas' side as he's looking more haggard than ever. It appears that he's grown a lot weaker, and the Keyblade is taking a toll on him. In the scene with the two of them on the clock tower, it's again mostly the same, but I do think Xion's somewhat pissed, "For your information, I worry about you all the time" Roxas line being replaced with a somewhat softer response feels a little bit less fun. Similarly, in the scene where Xion talks to Axel about Roxas, Axel feels a lot more harsh on Xion about her being a puppet who is unintentionally siphoning Roxas' strength. Both versions of the scenes are perfectly serviceable. I'm just saying I have a preference. Day 322, the scene with the three heads of the organization remains unchanged in either version, so that's good. That's a good sign. Xigbar talks about how Xion is looking a lot better these days, face of an angel, but he warns Roxas to be careful because girls her age have many faces, probably alluding to what we'll see her do as the final days approach. Xion herself tells us to be careful today, and Axel shows equal concern. Luxord thinks we should take a break and play a game of opening chests in a particular mission, which rewards us with another new special mission from Saix. Roxas has been tasked with locating Xaldin, who is days late returning from his mission to Beast Castle. In the ballroom, Belle wonders aloud why the Beast hasn't been acting like himself lately, and Roxas figures it must have something to do with Xaldin. In the East Wing, Lumiere and Cogsworth are thinking the same thing as Belle, and Cogsworth thinks it maybe might have something to do with a certain stranger in black that Mrs. Potts saw. She managed to see Xaldin even when he tried and succeeded in eluding the other two, and Mrs. Potts isn't even in the game officially outside of some mentions and a dialogue box or two. The unofficial, optional boss is the Zip Slasher, which is the electric version of the Chill Ripper. In the Beast's room of the West Wing, Roxas sees the Beast himself pacing around the room, calling someone a liar. It seems Xaldin has been really busy sowing the seeds of doubt in his heart. I really appreciate all of this setup because it really does make his whole moment in Kingdom Hearts 2 feel a billion times more impactful than it already was. With no sign of Xaldin anywhere, Roxas goes to RTC and finds that he's already there. Xaldin finds it very presumptuous of Saïx to send Roxas to find him, sort of the same way Xigbar reacted to Roxas as a backup some days before. At the end of it all, Roxas eats ice cream alone. Xigbar and Roxas team up together to go and defeat a Scorching Sphere in Olympus, and it's by far the worst variant of this kind of enemy, but it's always a pleasure to team up with good old Ziggy. The missions are getting noticeably harder, as on day 324, Roxas is sent to Wonderland on what seems like a normal heart collecting mission, but this place is overrun with not just a surplus of different prismatic melodies, but also 2 boss level Heartless in the form of a Nova Shadow and the Lurk Lizard. This really shows how badly the organization is trying to erase Roxas and keep Xion by giving him tougher missions, I suppose. And again, Roxas just eats ice cream by himself. So sad. I love Mission 86, not just because it's the most fun emblem collecting mission, but it also unintentionally confirms that while Xion never goes to Neverland to fly with Axel and Roxas, Luxor does, which I just think is so funny because Xion sounded like she really wanted to go when Roxas told her that he and Axel got to fly. Also, to keep adding to the trend of bosses showing up again in these later missions, there's a random Phantom Tail tailing you the entire game, which just adds a certain level of challenge. Day 326 is the last of our silly yet challenging missions before the final storm of emotional damage. This is one of the optional missions I've seen a lot of people struggle with. Roxas must fight 3 windstorms simultaneously while also avoiding some detonators. The windstorms are very weak to thunder spells though, so if you bring enough and equip them to max level, then the fight isn't really that bad. The exchange between Xion and Riku at the start of the day remains the same, so we'll skip past that, but I wanted to just say that after watching it back, it's a very underrated scene, and I love their dynamic. Roxas strides into the gray area as he usually does, and greets Xion with a good morning. She responds in kind before giving him the cold shoulder and walking off to start her mission. Saïx uncharacteristically asks Roxas how he's feeling today, which should already set off some alarms, but then he asks him politely to go and exterminate a Heartless in Halloween Town with his Keyblade, when usually he would just order him to do it. Roxas seems like he's taken aback a little bit, but readily agrees. However, Axel steps into the conversation to ask Roxas if he really wants to do that with how things have been going lately and how he's been feeling. Roxas seems to appreciate the concern and tells him that they'll catch up later before walking off. Saïx warns Axel to stop meddling and to let things run their course. I kind of wonder what the context for this mysterious Lux sword line is about. What do you guys think? Xigbar is giving some wingman advice now, I guess? He wants Roxas to go and get stronger because nobody wants to be with someone weaker than they are. This might be a little nod to him knowing just how powerful Xion really is, or will become, thanks to their plans with the devices. Upon arriving, Roxas wonders why Xion looked so upset earlier, and decides to ask her about it when he gets back from today's mission. The target Heartless isn't in the town square, so he decides to check the graveyard, and there it appears, the Orcus, a variant of the invincible Heartless that is much, much stronger. So strong, in fact, Roxas begins to worry he might not finish it off, so he puts all of his strength into one final attack, when suddenly, the illusion fades, and Axel is there, along with Xion. This was a setup by the organization to have the two fight to the death, and Axel made it just in time to stop it from happening. The power behind this scene is insane, only for it to be snubbed into a slideshow summary in the movie. Experiencing this for the first time in the game was just breathtaking. It's a really underrated experience. Another thing the movie did that was just insane was the removal of the other promise playing when Roxas proposes they all run away from the organization so they can be together forever. It's the only time in the game where the song plays, and they for some reason used it in other parts during the movie, but removed it from this very crucial scene? The audacity, dude. This is the scene where they promise to always remember these moments together forever. That's why the song is so significant here, because Roxas does forget despite his promise. I can't. This is one of the biggest sins in the movie. I'm noticing that the closer we get to the last day, the less stuff gets cut or changed out, which is good. Let's see if it stays true. Xigbar, Axel, and Xion are teamed up together to go on a mission, and Roxas wants to trade places with Xigbar, but Saïx pokes fun at him for needing Axel to go everywhere with him, shutting down the notion. The unlikely trio sets off, and Roxas is forced to go and do his toughest mission yet by himself. The scene in Wonderland with Xigbar seeing Ventus in place of Xion remains the same in both versions, but the drowning your goldfish line from Xigbar will be sorely missed, as the flavor in one of the best lines is once again removed. Roxas looks downtrodden and states that it's just him and the Heartless today. And what a lineup of Heartless it is, dude. Jeez. 6 of the strongest Heartless in the game are scattered in different locations around Twilight Town, with an optional 7th one that you may remember from a previous video that I did. This really seals the deal that the organization wants this boy dead, but he manages to pull through and heads home, hoping to see Xion and the others safe and sound. Axel says that Xigbar needs to get his eyes, plural, checked in the game, but it's been fixed in the movie to where he just says eye singular. Not sure if this is a translation thing or a real change that was done for the movie, but I'll take it. Everything else in the scene is pretty much the same. Every cutscene is exactly the same. The organization's meeting about Xion all the way up to Axel leaving to hunt her down, and Roxas trying to plead with him not to hurt her when he does. Luxord shares his thoughts about being at the bottom of the organization's pecking order, but after all, what's chess without pawns? Demyx seems the most shocked of all to find out Xion is a puppet, since she was so convincing. Saïx has a special project for us to place in Agrabah today, so Roxas heads right over to the Cave of Wonders to set it up. After reaching the treasure room, however, Roxas is ambushed by a land armor and does his best to defend the device from being destroyed by it. After vanquishing it, Roxas looks at the strange device again and wonders why he even tried so hard to defend it since he doesn't even know what it does, and he starts to realize that he's the biggest idiot of all for always doing what he's told without question. Right before he RTCs, Roxas has an additional moment of clarity. As he gazes up at the beautiful Arabian night sky, he begins to wonder why he even bothers with anything. He wonders if he has anything left to fight for, and any place he still belongs, and he sheds a single tear at this thought before putting on his hood and walking into the darkness. I absolutely adore this scene as it shows Roxas at his lowest point ever, flagging this moment as the start of the final leg of his journey in this entry in the series. Oh, and the Mickey and Riku scene is the same in both versions with slight dialogue alterations as usual. Nearly everything in Day 355 is the same, just retouched up, and might I just say, Roxas' whole rant to Axel here is iconic and incredible voice work on both sides, but especially from Jesse McCartney. This day is missing one very important thing though, that isn't even so much as mentioned in the movie: Roxas' great escape from the castle that never was. He's ambushed by nobodies all the while he transcends down the many paths and corridors of the castle until he reaches near the exit to find none other than Saïx waiting for him. Saïx says, "We don't accept resignations." Roxas responds with, "I don't have anything to say to you." Then let's keep this short and sweet. And in this brief exchange of words, the two engage in one of the most well-deserved boss fights of all time. All the pent-up rage one has for the other in this incredible showdown between manager and subordinate, and before he passes out, Saïx calls out for Kingdom Hearts, longing for its power. Oh, Day 356 is pretty much 1-to-1 in both versions. A+. Roxas has been wandering around Twilight Town ever since he escaped Castle Oblivion 2 days ago, completely at a loss on what to do next. He watches as the Twilight Town gang runs around, supposedly racing to see who buys the ice cream, and Roxas thinks solemnly to himself that it's nice that not all friendships fall apart, before choosing to go to the clock tower to collect his thoughts. Even when nobody else is there for him during this time, The mysterious hooded Moogle seems to have followed Roxas all the way from his former residence. I'd like to think it's because they're good friends, but it's probably because Roxas is his best customer. After Xion reveals her face to be identical to Sora, she transforms into her new form and warps Roxas to Wonderland, where the first strange device was placed. She grows some wings, and the first stage of her fight really begins. After defeating that form, she teleports Roxas to Halloween Town and gets yet another new weapon transformation. Then she repeats the process again by warping to where Roxas placed the last device in Agrabah, changing each time little by little until finally they have their final showdown at the clock tower, where Xion assumes her final form that you see in the movie. I always thought it was a little bit weird that they removed the organization's devices and Xion's other forms from the film, despite the fact that they were mentioned by Saïx, but I suppose the final stage of their battle is the most iconic and serves its purpose. But those other stages gave us as the player more time to let it sink in that we are literally killing our best friend and there's nothing we can do about it. It's also a very fun boss battle, which you can find out more on this video here. Oh yeah, here comes the tears, man. Oh, yeah, and I guess they cut out this scene after the fight where Saïx reports to Xemnas that Xion has been defeated, and so Xemnas orders him to retrieve Roxas. That would have been nice to keep in. The single coolest scene ever, where Roxas draws out both his and Xion's Keyblades and transforms them into the Oathkeeper in Oblivion, has just unreal levels of sauce. Getting to play the moment where Roxas fights off all the Neo Shadows and then Riku after we saw it years ago as the Kingdom Hearts 1 secret ending was just surreal to me when I was a kid first playing it, and it's still unbelievably cool all these years later. A perfect conclusion to a perfect game. To all who watched this video to the very end, I thank you. It took a very long time just to prepare the footage and write the script out for this one, and so I hope if you did watch this long, you subscribe for all my future Kingdom Hearts content. Days might not be everyone's favorite Kingdom Hearts game, and many may not even care about the little differences enough to play the game, no matter how many there are. But as someone who thinks about it daily, I knew it had to be done and turned into its own video. Shout out to K-Sui and all my other fellow Days fans who helped inspire this video, and I'll see you guys next month for March Caprice. Stay tuned.